Welcome on behalf of the members of the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus, from Trenton to you. I'm your host, New Jersey State Senator Ronald Rice, and Chairman of the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus. The members of the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus are very, very proud of our younger generations of young black Democrats. You know, it's interesting because for years we've been arguing that young people do not get involved with the political process nor with policy making as relate to the quality of life of residents throughout New Jersey, and that's all residents, but particularly those in the black and urban community. And so today we're going to have some discussions from a young man who's part of that generation that's starting to respond to the hue and cry of the people and the hue and cry of the caucuses throughout New Jersey as well as the country, and the hue and cry of civil rights leaders saying that young people need to engage, they need to express their views. But just as important, they need to organize and register to vote and come out and vote so that the concerns they have are raised and they're also addressed by those of us in the legislature who do get elected. And so with that today, I'm proud to say we have, Mr. Archange, and that's K-H-C-H-A, it's like change, it's Cange, okay, Archange. Yeah. Archange Antoine, who is the president of the Young Black Democratic Caucus here in New Jersey, but he's also the vice president of the Roselle School Board. And so, Archange, it's good to have you here with us. We have talked before, and I think
Absolutely.
You're doing some wonderful things. And man, you have a lot of energy. You're all over the state, you're organizing. I know that your peers really respect you. Those of us in the Legislative Black Caucus have a lot of respect for you, and we see such a good future for you as one of our up-and-coming young leaders. And so that's very important. And I think it's also important for our viewers today to get an opportunity to hear from you. And hopefully you can tell us, what it is that your generation is thinking. Where are those of us in my generation conflicting with the views and the politics of your generation? Because all too often we don't talk to our sons and daughters, if you will, coming
Absolutely.
behind us. All too often we don't educate our sons and daughters as to our history of growth, which many were not born during those struggles, and they're trying to pick up the baton, if you will, from where we are, not knowing the genesis or the history. And that's why many times you'll see programs that are very important to our community and to people of color and to immigrants and to women. They are defunded because people making decisions, whether they're black, white, Latino, the younger generation have budget problems. And they feel, well, this program is one I can cut, even though I like to keep it, I'm going to cut it.
Absolutely.
Not realizing it's important to maintain that program, given the history of it and why it's there in the first place. So we're going to have that discussion. But before we do have that discussion, my viewers know that I always ask our guests to come on to tell us something about themselves. The Archange that grew up, where he grew up at, the kinds of things he was doing, maybe about your education, the things you like to do, all the little girlfriends you had, or whatever you want to tell us, just tell us, because we have like an informal discussion.
Absolutely.
And we want people in our viewing audience and those who view the program to recognize that we're family. All of us are family, our viewers and those on the program. So tell us something about, Mr. Archange there,
Yeah, well, one, I want to thank you, Senator Rice, for inviting me on the show, and I want to just thank your audience just for the opportunity to just be before them. I'm Archange Antoine, like you said, and I was born and raised as a little kid in Elizabeth. My family originally from Haiti. They moved us out there. They had my brother in Massachusetts, in Manhattan, and they had me and my sister in Elizabeth. And growing up there was no crystal stair, Elizabeth was really good to me. It was really community. Had a lot of great friends. I really learned a lot just about how to survive, how to stand up for myself. And the way my mom raised us, she always said that this is our country, and we should strive to be the best possible people and secure the opportunities that we possibly could. And again, Elizabeth was, really good for us growing up. Really created a foundation to me with me, my brother, and my sister. And growing up there, I can just remember us, playing football in the streets because there weren't a lot of parks around.
Right.
And so we also had, watch out for the police because they didn't want us playing football in the street. So we was in the catch-22. And then it wasn't until, I was living in apartment buildings, and my mom was just trying to work 3 jobs just to make sure that, food was on the table for us, and just was encouraging us to do well in school and stay focused. And then there was an opportunity that came up where my mom saw a house to buy in Roselle, which was the next town over. Right. And so she was like, we're moving. We were like, where we going, And so she took every savings that she had, and she put it together, and she bought the house in Roselle. And really, that was sort of a step for us to have our own yard and, to come out. And even though it was the next town, I used to take the bus all the time. All my friends were there. And really, my mom, the philosophy was, how can she sacrifice for us now so that we are in the best position later? And we went to school, and we worked hard, and went to church every single day. Okay. But again, my mom loved us with all of our heart, and she worked hard for us, And so pretty much Elizabeth and Roselle made me in whole Union County, because friends in Linden and friends in Rahway, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's a very interesting story, because we don't give enough credit to our moms, or to our pops, and in many cases to our grandparents who really take responsibility. But she certainly raised you right, and I think all of us in New Jersey who have observed you and know the kinds of things you do, recognize you come from good quality stock, man, and that's a good thing. And coming up in Elizabeth is not a bad thing. I used to hang out there when I was a youngster in high school, I had some pretty good little crop growing up out there, And Roselle was one of those swing places too for those coming up. But things have changed over the years in all of these cities. And we're going to get into a lot of reviews, and we're going to talk about the Young Dems, and you being the chairman of the Young Dems, Black Caucus, and things that magnitude. But one of the things that's really important to our viewers, and one of the things that we have a lot of discussion on in the Black Caucus, because we have to stay in the forefront of it for a lot of different reasons, is really education, the quality of education. And so before we move into what I really have you here for, the Young Dems, tell me something about the Roselle School Board. How big a school board is it? What's your student population, the kinds of things you're doing out there? Because I understand you're doing some pretty good things.
Yeah, so I've been on the school board since 2011. I got elected, and just recently I got reelected. So thank you for everybody out there who voted for me. And honestly, once I finished college, coming back home, it became personal. I wanted an opportunity to be a part of the solution, and what can I do with the people on the board to get some things done. And honestly, it's been a life-changing experience. You're literally talking about understanding how government works, how to work with people, and seeing a vision come to pass. Right. And also realizing nothing happens overnight. That's a reality. As much as parents call and they have these issues, you just got to make sure that they're patient. But at the same time, a phone call could come that same day that they reach out. Mm-hmm. And so Roselle is a town, about 20-something thousand people in the town. We have about 3,000 students all in our districts. We have 6 schools. Mm-hmm. We had a $51 million budget before Governor cut it. But again, we are a very tight community, very tight community, very active and engaged parents, and we're one of those communities that it's a quote unquote suburb, but we have the same demographics that you will find in Elizabeth and Newark, But the only thing is we got the title quote unquote suburb, and I'm the chairman right now. I'm the chairman of curriculum and technology. And I asked the president at the time to make sure that I was the curriculum chairman, because you're literally talking about how kids learn. That's where you're at. You're making sure that is the basic skills there, is the support there, are the tutors there, and what are they learning? And one of the key initiatives that I make sure we have a large Latino population, we have a large African American population in our school district, and we have within those communities we have one of the largest diverse languages in the whole entire state. And one of the things I made sure that we were making sure that we were doing was, as students are learning, they were having an opportunity to apply some of their culture and their heritage to what they were learning. So those who were from Mexico, how do we apply in the ESL classes to writing and reading, but also connecting it to them? And more importantly, I think we have an Amistad program that is obviously mandated all around the state of New Jersey, and we've been doing a good job with implementing it. But one of the key things that I really wanted to make sure that our students were focused on is understanding Black history, not just in February, and not even from, what we do is we start Black history from slavery and we move on up.
Exactly.
Like there was nothing that existed before it.
Yeah.
And so I've been talking to a lot of our history professors, I've been talking to a lot of the college professors and talking to our administration, and they understand it. And actually some of them said, we never really thought about that. You know, we always start from Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and then we come to Obama and we're saying great. And so there were some great leaders from all around the world who traveled and who were working with different philosophers and who were mathematicians and helped develop new technologies. And how do we incorporate that? And one thing is, it's about knowing yourself. And as an individual, what you're associated with, knowing the background behind that. And I feel that if we can make sure that all of our students are connected to their roots from an educational standpoint, I think that will give them the self-esteem that they need to continue moving forward. And so that's what I'm really proud of.
I think that's excellent, because there's a lot of talk about the Armstead bill, which I was a part of moving along with Bill Payne, the sponsor, Craig Stanton, and the Assembly at the time. And the commission tell us still that they continue to try to cut funding. But, you know, to me, it doesn't make any sense that we have to mandate that you teach the kind of curriculum, teach the kind of relationships and connection that a person of your generation is trying to do in Roselle. It shouldn't even have to be a mandate at all. We're all a part of history, and you are right. What a lot of people do not know, Black, whites, other ethnic groups, young generation, old, is that slavery is what we talk about. But Black folks were in this country prior to slavery. It was indentured servitude. And they didn't come over with white folks being mad with Black folk and all that racial stuff. They came over as partners on a contract relationship.
Absolutely.
Because what happened was, when this country was founded, or at least taken over, it was always here, then there was land. And when the landowners decided that they identified the pieces of land that they wanted, then someone had to work the land to grow the crops and the farm and everything else. So they sent a letter to Europe, and they said to the Europeans is that anyone who was willing to come to America and work our land, we'll give you a contract to work it, and after the end of maybe 5 to 10 years, we'll give you some land, and you're on your own, you no longer work for us. Well, they were on the boat, Blacks and whites together, saying, hey, brother, I'm going to America. Yeah, I got a contract too, man. We're going to work the farm, okay? It wasn't like, why are you getting the job, I'm not getting the job. The history of it all, and the need to be taught, is that slavery came after that. Because Black and whites, Europeans, when the contract ended for working the land, they were given land. And they had their own land now. So there was nobody left to work the land of the other landowners, and that's when slavery started. And so we really need to go back and tell our history the way it is. We need to tell the history of other ethnic groups the way it is, not just the piece of history that we want people to know.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think what you're doing in Roselle is really important, and that's what the Jersey Black Caucus keeps trying to insist on, and to get our colleagues to understand and the governors to understand why the Armstead bill is so important, and get the people who are running our school districts to understand it's important to teach history, our history, meaning Black history, Latino history in this country, et cetera, Italian history, Irish history, not just history they want us to teach, okay?
Absolutely.
Et cetera.
And
now, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's important because, one, we have to realize that it's not Black history, it is American history. So
that's it.
And what I like to say is that when a lot of folks, if they take the time to really trace their roots, you know, obviously we had a big migration here in the 60s and the 40s and the 50s and the 40s, et cetera. But then there were some folks that this is where you started, you know, and your roots go 1800s here,
Yes, yes.
and a lot of those are black folks
Yes.
who helped build this country.
Yes.
So again, when we're talking about studying history, we need to make sure that history is aligned to inculcate all of history. And more importantly, I just think it's not necessarily trying to get our kids to be proud, just be proud of being black. That's not the goal. Everybody should be proud of who they're associated, whether it's your faith, whether it's your family. It's also to understand that white people have done great things in this world. Black people have done great things, and there've been a mixture of, and there's been great things done by all people. And so we need to make sure, and this is one thing that we're focused, where my vision is, how do we make sure that our young African American and young black men and women are leading on black issues, but are also leading on all issues that affect all people. Because I think our president is a prime example of that, a black man in office doing great things for all people.
Right.
And at the same time, he's conscious of who he is. And so again, how do we make sure that we don't try to box our kids or box our young men so that they can continue running the Fortune 500 companies,
Right.
so they continue being chairmen of different boards. And so again, ultimately, I think that's our vision.
Well, that's a good segue into the politics of the younger generation and the views of the younger generation. And before we do that, though, I just want to remind the audience also, it's one of the histories we don't teach all of. It's really those who were always in this country, and that's the American Indians. I think that the way the American Indians were treated and still get treated today are wrong, but there seemed to be no champion of their cause in the legislature, including New Jersey. At one time, we had Senator Zane, who ancestors were Indians, and I guess it may have been mixed, but it was Indian, and he used to really kind of keep us focused on those issues too.
Yeah.
And I think America need to revisit treaties and all that crap they did taking people land, okay? Because to me it's just wrong. But moving from that to the politics. Now, you are the chairman of the New Jersey Young Democrats Black Caucus.
Yes.
Councilman Rice, my son, the former councilman who's since moved,
to
got
DC.
married. Yeah, y'all connected, okay?
Absolutely.
But he was president of
man.
the Young Dems at one time. The Young Dems, Democrats, like the Young Republicans, unlike the Young Republicans in most cases, but the Young Democrats is a real diverse group of young leadership who are Democrats by way of party affiliation.
Absolutely.
And then for the audience, there's also, so there's no bias, there's a young Republican organization. I'm not sure what they do, but there is a young Republican organization of young people. And these are all the same generations of individuals, our sons and daughters, and community neighbors, et cetera, who we've raised to think on their own. Hopefully that's what they do, most of them anyway. And they choose the philosophies, the ideologies that they respect and they want to promulgate. And that's in both sides, the aisles, both sides, the parties, Republicans, Democrats, and there are young independents out there, and I guess they're young Green Party folk. But we're focusing now on the issues that impact the lives of black people in particular, and the need to have the young Democratic Black Caucus, just like it's a need to have the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus, the New Jersey Legislative Latino Caucus. You would think in the times we're in, we don't need caucuses, but no one seems to understand our issues or want to pay attention to them until we organize and force those issues. I mean, that's just real, et cetera. So, Archange, why don't you tell us, number one, about the Young Democrats, and then talk about the Young Democrats as relates to the Young Democratic Black Caucus.
Okay.
So our people will have a history, meaning the viewers, will have some history of the genesis of the organization and what it means to all of us, your involvement in the things that you do.
Yeah. So the Young Democrats of New Jersey is currently being spearheaded by President Marshall Spivak. And and Chris James actually was the previous president before him. And the statewide organization is connected to the national organization, which is the Young Democrats of America. And they're also in relationship with the DNC. And the organization is really, how do we cultivate young talent? How do we make sure that we support our young elected officials? And how do we keep our folks and young folks all around the state and around the country engaged in the political process? And like Senator Rice said, the goal is to make sure that we have diversity within our organizations as well, and that's why we have a lot of the caucuses. In New Jersey, it's the first time that we've had the Black Caucus. Normally we have a minority caucus, which is incumbents of different minority groups. But this time around, they felt the need, and I got picked. I don't know if I got picked out of a hat or something, but I was chosen. And one of the things that I wanted to do initially was just to have a kickoff. So we were chewing bubblegum and walking at the same time, trying to put together a team and make sure we decided to have our first statewide summit. And in that summit, we had the State of Young Black People. And we bought Professor David Trout from Rutgers Law. We bought different elected officials from South Jersey and Central Jersey, North Jersey. We had a panel discussion. And the goal was to just kind of get the engines rolling, letting people know to be active, to be engaged. We've been very supportive by the New Jersey Young Dems. And again, we had a great event. It was on a rainy day, but we had over 100 people come out. We had it at the Pastor Bustasaurus Church in Summit, and obviously you were one of our speakers. And the chairman Curry came out, and it was a great event. And again, it was to stimulate that. And for the first time, a lot of young Black men and women came to me and to the team and were saying, where was this? We need this. There was a lot of information, and one of the things we were trying to touch on, and we're going to continue doing it, is looking at public policy and how it affects our daily lives. And I think sometimes in our communities we see what's happening, and we see sometimes there's a problem and there's another problem here and there's another problem there, but we don't know where the root is to these problems. We don't know how they started, and sometimes we don't know how to get it fixed. And that's where frustration comes into place right now. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that I told somebody there's never ever a problem with being angry. It's how you channel that anger. Right. The Bible says, "Be angry, but not sin." It never said you can't be angry. Exactly. So, and when people are upset, whether it's what's happening on the federal level, state level, local level, I never found it appropriate to tell people not to be angry. And plus, it's a way to express yourself. But it's how do we continue to channel that energy to something productive? And what we're trying to do is make sure that we're bringing folks in and we're channeling that energy to make sure they're engaged and they're voting and they're registering. But more importantly, on the other side, what are some legislations that we are interested in and we think that would be good for young people and young Black men and women in the state of New Jersey? And again, it's that line of policy and politics all working in together, and community and organization. So it's all these dynamics working together. But I think we're headed in the right direction. And more importantly, we realize the caucus itself can never get anything accomplished. It is the relationships, it is the partnerships that we're going to have to get things done. And that's why, again, with the partnership with the Black Caucus, the Legislative Caucus, the partnership with the National YDA, and Women's Caucus and the Jewish Caucus, because you need allies in order to get anything done. And so I would say they are very supportive of what we're trying to do. And again, we're just trying to make some good things happen in New Jersey.
Well, once again, as our viewers can see, you're very articulate and you're very committed and you're very concerned. And we share the same values. And I always tell people, they used to ask me when I was running for office, they said, well, I noticed that in this election, you're not supporting your son. And I said, no, I'm not supporting my son in the election because he was raised with values. And I don't want him to be in a position where his peers and others convince him to challenge someone who's already in office that's doing the job. Then they asked my son, they said, well, what do you think? He said, well, my dad and I see things differently. And that's what the media said. That's not what he said. They misinterpreted. So they asked me the question, well, the media said that you and your son see things differently. I said, well, where did they get that from? They said, well, I don't know, tell us. I said, we don't see things differently. He said, you guys the older generation. I said, we don't see things differently. I said, let me tell you what my son wants. My son wants good government. My son wants to be able to walk down the streets without people gunning him down, etc. My son wants a good quality of education. That's what his generation wants. My son wants job opportunities and economic justice.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you what Mrs. Senior Citizen wants, or Mr. Senior Citizen. They want to be able to walk down the same street without getting gunned down. They want to make sure their grandkids have a good quality education and there's economic justice. They want to make sure the system is fair. So tell me what's different. The only thing that's different is the age. And so it becomes important for the Young Dems Democratic Black Caucus to be closely bonded and vice versa to the Legislative Black Caucus and other groups of color so that our strength that we showed back in the 60s can help get our policy issues at the table to be a part of the discussion.
Absolutely.
One of the things that disturbed me, and it's the first time I'm saying it publicly, and it still bothers me, and I'm going to address it.
Yes.
As the chairman of the Legislative Black Caucus, is that our colleagues who are not African American, okay, in leadership roles continue to want to dictate to black leaders in this state. Local elected officials, mayor, council, freeholders have a responsibility, whether they're black or white, to the people they represent. And in the case of an African American, whites who are in the majority have said to folk they would not meet with them, okay, because they chose as a group to challenge a non-black who wouldn't have meetings with them to talk about the issues impacting their community. And that was that congressional election. And I thought that was over. Now the talk is, well, we're going to challenge the black mayor, okay, that ran against the white candidate for Congress, okay, because he ran. Well, he only ran because every time we try to set up meetings, I was in the forefront of trying to set the meeting up, so I know it was happening.
Okay.
They said no. And so the ability to challenge wasn't the issue that the candidate was going to win. It was to get the attention of the person that we knew was going to Congress so that the issues of that diverse community and the issue of black folk and women and minorities could be at the table. We needed to know how you're going to treat these issues in Congress. So as a result of that, your peers decide that they're going to come after this particular local elected official who just happened to be black. And so this whole mentality that you dictate to us, and people have heard me say this before, and a lot of viewers know it, the Democratic Party has put me off the party line 2 or 3 times. And that's Joe DeFacenzo getting in bed with black leaders like Sharp and all the rest of them and Tommy Goodman and everybody else. The next day, I didn't go after nobody. I just said, okay, how are we going to fix the people's problems, okay? And that's why I have a problem with some of the political bosses, because as young Democrats, I've observed the same thing in past years. And that's why I'm glad the new generation of young Democrats is not only are you diversified, but you have the kinds of relationships and understanding that it's not the color of your skin or your gender that's making the difference in the quality of life for people. It's what you stand for and what you promulgate and what you work and fight for. That becomes important. The other thing is that I want to help you teach those who don't know that the history of black people in this country and women and immigrants, but the history of struggles back in the 50s and the 60s was one because we came together.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, in order to come together, we had the kinds of problems in our communities that we face today. There were people who did not have jobs. There were people losing homes. Education system was failing some folk. In fact, they were segregated. And there were housing needs and healthcare needs. But what we did was met in the churches, because you mentioned the church 7 days a week. We met there as community leaders, our ancestors did, our fathers and grandparents, etc., to try to figure out collectively how do we fix the problem on housing? Now, we didn't know. They didn't know. But you may throw an idea out that seems like it may help, and then I would add to your idea and someone else would add. There were a series of meetings on a regular basis.
Yeah.
They became what you call think tank meetings that you came out with policy. Mm-hmm. And what I want our audience to know, because this is an education program and I'm educating right now, I want our audience to know that it was coming together on a regular basis, talking about our problems, working together to find solutions that created and developed the policies that impact the quality of life in our community. It was the policies that we came up with that determined the politics. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is that young Dems need to understand, don't get away from meeting on a regular basis to decide and shape policy. Mm-hmm. Black folk after the 60s got involved with politics and got away from shaping policies. Where's the problem? The problem is that politics come once a year. In other words, there's an election once a year.
Absolutely.
So in between the election and the next year, we're doing nothing. In the meanwhile, the political bosses and power players, are meeting regularly, setting policies and developing coalitions how to set us back in the very things that we work hard to progress on. Mm-hmm. And so hopefully the young Dems would become not only an organization of issues and policies and concerned about elections, but one that would recognize that the business of coming together on a regular basis, not once a year, is about policy setting. And then it's the policy that we collectively agree on that we take to folk and say, you're not going to treat us, we're going to be a part of the conversation at the table. And don't challenge me as an elected official. I'd rather not be a senator if I got to rubber stamp your stuff. I'd rather not be a senator if I can't have what my constituency base says is important for discussion on the table. Don't tell me you're going to come and fight us because you have all the money and it's more of you and your district than it's us. We're going to fight you back. And see, we can't be ashamed, and I don't want young Dems to be ashamed to stand up because you're in political wars. And in a war, there's combat, somebody get hurt. So I may get hurt, I may lose my title fighting back.
Yeah.
But fine, we fight. You may lose a job in the process that somebody gave you that you shouldn't take in the first place if they're going to hold you to it, okay? So I know I've said a lot in education, so I said that to set the stage for you to come back to you, Archange, to tell us, how do your organization, particularly Young Black Caucus members, how do they view the kinds of things I'm saying now? Are you working in that direction? Do you understand it?
Absolutely. Okay. So to kind of touch on some of what you said, I think at the end of the day, it's about power. That's what it is. And as you know, it's one thing to know, it's another thing to teach another person to know. And those are two very difficult things to transition. And what I always tell is that I think we have a great team that's been working to understand how South Jersey works, how Central Jersey works, how North Jersey works, how different counties work. Mm-hmm. But it's a very tedious process when you're trying to teach new people who are coming on board, mm-hmm. especially when you want to move in a particular direction and there's so many questions that come up. Right. So that prevents you from even moving a step forward. I would say we have such great young Black men and women throughout the state of New Jersey, mm-hmm. who are willing to learn, who understand, who've been in the trenches for a very long time, and who have policy backgrounds. I mean, they went to school for it. And again, I think right now we're at the building stages. And one of the things that I always said, that no matter what you're trying to do on this earth, mm-hmm. if you are trying to make change, change has to happen with the ability to teach others the importance of the change. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what unions are about. They mm-hmm. teach their members, they get in the ground, they organize, and they say we have to move in this direction. Mm-hmm. And what we've been focusing on is, again, how do we, as new people come on board and they want to be a part of the caucus, and we want to make sure that we're setting the precedent that education is a part of what we're about. One is teaching people about policy, looking at housing, looking at criminal justice, looking at education, looking at the state of our communities and why why they're in the situations they're in, and more importantly, also understanding that things happen as a result of the relationships that you have, and that's why when you grow up, if you grow up in a certain county, you don't know other Dems in other counties because you're taught this is home, this is family. And what we're trying, when I've been challenging a lot of the folks that I've been meeting is step out your box.
Yes.
You know, if you do not step out your box and you isolate yourself, it's never good. It's never good personally, it's never good professionally, and it's never good in the political environment. You need friends, you need allies in other places. You need people to give you advice who are not tainted. Who are not going to take your seat and take your position, or a relative that is so nervous that you're going to do this. You need people to give you a sound advice. So I think I'm a visionary. I like to have a vision. I like to have big pictures, but I'm pragmatic too.
Right.
And so, and also one thing that we don't want to get in the business of is galvanizing people, getting them excited, and then not being able to accomplish anything.
Exactly.
And so then you have a large group of people who are disenchanted. And the reasons why I say that, and that's why I always say that there's nothing wrong with praying.
That's right. That's right.
But after you're done praying, you got to come up with something. What is it? You know?
Right.
And so even when you look at the churches, I think that the churches are a place where we have a lot of leaders at. They're in the choir, a lot of young ministers all throughout New Jersey. I mean, they're doing excellent work, but do not incapacitate people with the power of religion and the power of the Bible, especially when it's not contextual. Right. And so I think we have such a strong presence in the church, and I'm challenging our ministers and I'm challenging our clergy to encourage and allow members to be open to being engaged, not verbalizing and not just marching, but making sure that they're actually learning about policy, they're learning about the politics, and more importantly, they're meeting people and they're building these relationships. And I think that's the essence of everything. You don't get anything done if you do not have these relationships intact, if people don't trust you, And so I'm very basics. And so moving forward, we're really focused on teaching. That's where we want to be. We're looking long term, and we're looking at, again, how do we continue to teach people to understand, and then they could have a little more foundation to move forward.
I'm glad to hear that, because one of the things as chairman of the Jersey Black Caucus that I'm trying to create what we call black elected officials, democratic policy, not politics. Policy, that's a very important word and powerful word, throughout the state from county to county. I know that some of the leadership and political bosses throughout going to interfere because they don't want black folk to come together who happen to be black elected officials to start to sit down and talk about policy issues rather than politics. But I also recognize we have a lot of old timers who have been stuck in their ways throughout the years. There are newcomers who are being sold a bill of goods about the history, even the growth, and how they even got office. People think, well, I'm a black elected official because the white people like me so much, or somebody else loved me so much that they got me in. No, you're a black elected official. I don't care what county you come from, because of the struggle of black folk in this country and women and minorities to make sure that the doors are open. If you look at some of the counties, we don't have any black elected officials in key positions, okay? We're black elected officials because they are white bosses, political bosses, and people that control the system or want to control the system. They like to, I call it shin and grin and smile at us, but recognize they can't win without our 10% or 15% of the vote against their own, et cetera. And so it's the kind of history and the teaching that needs to take place. It don't mean we don't work with them. It don't mean we don't love them and stuff like that. But we have to teach black elected officials the realities of life. And we have to go back and teach them at these summits, okay, These are the rules. I'm talking about the statutory rules. You should not be going to jail for somebody's mess, okay? Because you don't understand the rules. You should not be going to jail because you're unethical. We need to give you ethics training. I don't know what they're telling you, but we're going to tell you everything you need to know to be a leader. Collectively, as young black Dems and those of us who are chairs of civil rights groups, and the Legislative Black Caucus and things like that, locally and nationally, should be saying that we're going to hold annual summises to educate our folk about what they should be doing, what's expected of a leader, what's expected of a black leader in particular, from our perspective, what are the ethnic laws, how do we remove barriers from black leadership? For example, I know one of my assembly members in my caucus, and I'm going to deal with that too, he could not vote for a particular bill the other day. And he made it clear he can't vote for it given the makeup of his district and some of the feelings of his constituency base. So the chairman, who happened to be non-black, told him, well, if you can't vote for this bill, leave the committee, get off. Well, who are you? See, this is the kind of things that the public don't know is happening now with black leadership. And we're going to deal with that because folk have to know you're not going to dictate my destiny as a person. And I have a right to agree and disagree regardless of what you think on issues impacting the quality of life for people throughout the state of New Jersey and in my district where I get elected. You can't tell me in South Jersey we can't meet with you, so we decide since we can't meet, you're going to run somebody against us because we ran somebody against you. This mentality need to stop. Everybody want to be the governor. The others want to be presidents, and so folk who are not of color, and their majority are in bed with each other, and not one black is being brought to the table. Yeah. The young Dems can pay attention to that. If you read about the guy in Jersey City want to be the governor, the city president want to be the governor, this other guy Murphy want to be the governor, this one. But when you see the meetings they're having, the press never tell you that, Archange, Ron Rice, Jerry Harris, I'm using names now, young Dem, black labor leaders, we're at the table. It's like, we're going to do what we do, then we're going to come to you and tell you what you have to do. Absolutely. And I said, no, we're going to be a part of that conversation, okay? Yeah. We have to be for the people we represent. Absolutely. Speak on that.
So, I look at it as a couple of ways. One, I'm not a civil rights expert like you, or during that era, but one thing I've saw with Martin Luther King is he was able to make sure that he galvanized the people, he educated the people, and he was very clear about the conditions that were in the black community and what he wanted to happen. But at the same time, he also realized that not all people who were not black were against them. He had to work with them, and there were people who sacrificed their lives because they were as passionate about the black cause and just justice itself. And I even look at, as much as we talk about Malcolm X, Malcolm X had a development in his life where, after traveling the world, he just said there were people who were in his cause that were as white as snow and had blue green eyes. Yes. And so my point is saying, one is just to say that you have to understand that everybody who doesn't look like you is not necessarily against you. Exactly. And at the same time, everybody who's black and who looks like you is not with you. Right. And so again, and that's why I said sometimes, as much as we're talking about the importance of the Black Caucus, it's important, and every other caucus is important, but it's also about power at the end of the day. Yes. And so again, it's understanding, because I would say some of my mentors coming up had a lot of black leaders and black mentors, but some of them were as white as snow again. Yes. And they've been very helpful in my development, and they've encouraged me to make sure I'm focusing on organizing our community because they see what's happening. Yes. And they're one voice, and they can't just speak us, but they know if we start to really put our minds together, we can make some things happen. And so again, with the caucus, the vision is for us to understand, and that's why we're going to have to meet a little more, and for you to share some legislative challenges that you're having. But again, I really think for moving 2015 is really foundation building. Yes. We have to. We can't get so caught up in short-term injustices that we lose it, you know. And so it's like right now, hey, I'm a football fan, and one of my running backs, he had a broken hand.
Okay.
So does he get in the game with a broken hand and re-injure it,
Right,
so he's
right.
not ready for the Super Bowl?
Exactly.
You know, so that's the thing that I'm looking at right now. We have broken communities and we have broken pieces. We have holistic people, great people out there, but they're just not together. They just don't understand. And we sort of have to be invested long term. And if we are, and we get to figure out where our differences is, but we figure out where we are together, I think we can really get some things done. But more importantly, organizing black communities and black communities starting to prosper ultimately helps America. And see, this is what my passion is education, because one of the things that we do is we put so much money into, you know, quote unquote, the educational system, but it's never because of teachers. And that's why I said teachers have got beat down for years. And it was never about the teachers. It was never about the administrators. It was never about all these other minor things. I mean, some districts, they are key people that are major issues. But it is about the economic conditions in these communities.
Yes.
No matter what research you find, the more you go into the research, if you want to figure out why the schools do well, it's because the socioeconomic status of the people that's living here are doing well. And so when you're talking about generations, where are these young black men and women are going to be 20 years from now? Where these Latino people are going to be? If you don't invest in them and you make, and it's not just legislation, it's the sacrifices that we have to make. And that's what you said. People have to learn right now, how do we make the sacrifices for these generations coming up?
Exactly.
And what I said is, we have folks right now who are in leadership. They're benefiting not from things that they voted on. They're benefiting from what their grandparents voted on, their parents voted on. And my point is saying, is there a level of hypocrisy if you benefited from what your father and your grandfather did to get you in the position of the American dream, and you're not in the business of helping the next generation?
It's a big contradiction in itself. You know, I've always argued, and I'm going to continue to argue, and you're right, the history that you spoke of is a history. I always tell my colleagues in Trenton, my non-black colleagues, that look, the reason I stand up for civil rights and the reason I'm so articulate and so outspoken, okay, and passionate about how black people and immigrants and women are being treated in this state, and then I said, because I represent the most wealthiest people in the state, I represent the middle class and the poorest at the same time. That's a very diverse population, ethnically and economically. But I also remind them that when you tell me you can't meet with a group, an aggregate of black leaders, to discuss issues and policies when you're running for something, but you expect to have our vote, then it means that we don't have your ear. If I can't change tells me that, you know, we have to work with everybody, you're right, but how do you work with somebody don't sit and meet with you and have discussion? And so the idea is that I always tell folk that we have to come back together, and when folk we can't get their attention, then we need to use the tools that we know are effective. When people ask me about Ferguson, they ask me about New York, what I think about the demonstrations. I said the demonstrations are very necessary in the times we're in, but the nonviolence, the violent stuff is not. But the demonstration, because nobody's listening to us, it's not about race. Ferguson is not about race to me. New York is not about race to me. Ultimately, that's what it culminated to.
Absolutely.
It's about the fact that nobody's listening. And I've also argued that whites have always marched with us. They've always been a part of our lives. And so we have to remind people, when we demonstrate for black folk, then we're demonstrating for the rights of all folk. When we speak out for black folk injustices, we're speaking out for the rights of all folk in justice, et cetera, et cetera. I know we're going to wrap now, so I want you to have the final word. I'm just so happy to have you. We're going to get you back, man, because, you know, I know that my audience and the viewers are really interested in what you had to say, and I really think they appreciate your generation and you as a leader. So tell them some closing remarks.
Yeah, well, again, thank you again, Senator Rice, for having me. And what I wanted to say is that politics is not a bad thing. It all depends on who is in the politics. power is not a bad thing. It all depends on who has the power. And I always say that, you remember, I always reference God because it's the foundation of my life. And God told the disciples, you can't accomplish anything without power. And my point is just saying that never stray away from politics and power and being involved. Teach yourself, educate yourself, learn from others. But more importantly, I would say it's the economy. It's the economy. Like the saying was, the economy's stupid. Because if you start to look at the economics behind communities in the state of New Jersey, you will start to understand how things work. So again, thank you again, Senator.
Thank you for coming on, my brother.
Yes.
And we're going to talk some more, and I'm going to have some good conversations. Thank you.
You.